We're going to take a look at a 2024 mock draft, but really quickly, I want to share a comment that we got in a recent video with all of our viewers coming in from Caleb Baited, who asked, I have a question for the fans. Would you rather have Desmond Ridder or Arthur Smith come back next year? And I thought it was a pretty good, interesting question. I would lean towards Arthur Smith for sure, but let me know who you'd rather have come back down below in the comment section. Coming up on today's show, we're going to take a look at Dane Brugler's first mock draft for 2024. He is the Athletics NFL draft expert, and in my opinion, he is the best NFL draft expert out there. I have him ahead of McShay, Kiper, all of those guys. But before we look and see who we had Atlanta selecting, I want to kind of start the conversation off with this. How accurate are November mock drafts? For starters, no mock draft is really all that accurate, even the ones that come out the day before the draft. But what about mock drafts that come out in November? Well, if we go back in time and we look at Dane Brugler's 2023 mock draft, which came out this week last year, he correctly picked 5 players who ended up going top 10. Now, he did not pick them to the right team necessarily, but at least he had 5 guys in the top 10 who went top 10. 19 of his 31 picks ended up going in the first round like he predicted. 4 picks did not go in rounds 1 or 2, so there is still some volatility about which rounds players go in. The most accurate selection he had, Paris Johnson going to the Cardinals at number 7. He ended up going to the Cardinals at number 6. The biggest miss for all the guys he had going in the first round, Devin Witherspoon, he had him falling all the way to number 27. Witherspoon went to the Seahawks at number 5. Now, how does that stack up against some other publications and their mock drafts? Well, he went 19 for 31. CBS batted 500. They went 16 for 31. Pro Football Network went 15 for 31. And Bleacher Report went 13 for 31. It's not easy. These are crystal balls right now. This is way down the line. It's a crapshoot this early. So we're going to run through this Dane Brugler mock draft, but I want everyone to know, last year he went 19 of 31, not for the correct picks, just guys who end up even going in the first round. So let alone getting them to the right team right now, which it's very difficult to say because we don't know the final draft order, but just getting the first round guys down is a very difficult task. But let's jump into Brugler's first mock draft for 2024. Caleb Williams goes to the Windy City first overall. No big deal or anything, but last year my hot take was Marvin Harrison goes number 2 no matter what. And let's see if that holds true, as Brugler has him going to the Cardinals, Drake May to the Patriots, Joe Alt to the Bears. Moving on here, Olu out of Penn State, he goes to the Commies. Malik Neighbors, I think, is going to be a really special and talented receiver. He finds a home in New York. How about Brock Bowers? Unfortunately, his career will get ruined with the Jets. Dallas Turner, he goes from Bama over to Nashville. Keon Coleman, a really good player out of Tallahassee, going to play with Chris Olave. Moving along here as we get closer and closer to Atlanta, who is currently selected to pick 19th overall. And drum roll, please. Chop Robinson, edge rusher out of Penn State. Now, for shits and giggles, we'll run through the rest of the mock draft before we do a deep dive on Chop Robinson. J.J. McCarthy, for anyone looking for a quarterback, he went to the Seahawks at 22, and that's going to be the last quarterback that goes in the first round. We've got some more Ohio State Buckeyes going towards the end of the first round. And to round out the final 4 picks, the Philadelphia Eagles, currently slated to have the last pick in the draft just based off reverse standings, they go offensive line. So let's talk a little bit about Chop Robinson. He's 6'3", he's 254 pounds, but he runs like a 6'1", 210-pound player would. He's too big to be that fast. That's why he's being in the first round right now. All right, he transferred to Penn State from Maryland after his first season. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention player. But when you look at the actual production, no one looks at 4 sacks and starts pounding the table screaming, that's a player that's going to go round 1. So why is Chop Robinson getting first round buzz? It's because of his physical traits. And when we get to the combine and when we get to pro days, Chop Robinson's stock is only going to go up and up, in my opinion. Here's what Brugler had to say. A player with a wide projection range, Robinson's body of work says 3rd round, but his ceiling and flashes point to round 1. The Falcons' pass rush has ranked near the bottom of the league for far too long. and Robinson's explosiveness off the edge is a potential answer to that problem. Let's talk about players like Chop Robinson, all right? Players that come out of college with maybe not a whole bunch of production done, similar to Zach Harrison last year, who went to Atlanta out of Ohio State, but who have the traits, right? You know those draft nerds who drool over combine measurements? Like, dude, that size and that speed, those guys don't grow on trees. Like, even I find myself in that camp every once in a while, but the guys who truly, spank their meat to hand size from quarterbacks, let's talk about that for a moment. Not the spanking the meat part, but the Chop Robinson coming out of Penn State without a whole bunch of production. Now, I looked back at the NFL draft results from 2017 to 2020, and in that span, 19 edge rushers were selected. Of those 19 edge rushers in that 4-year span, only 11 had their 5th-year option picked up or were selected to go to a Pro Bowl. So I'm going to say 11 of those 19 picks were successful. So of those 11 successful picks, 5th-year option picked up or a Pro Bowl appearance, none of them had less than 5.5 sacks in a single season during their college career. Chop Robinson's single high season is 5.5 sacks, which does tie Rashawn Gary out of Michigan, but he was more of an interior defensive lineman while playing in Ann Arbor. All right. How about career sacks? Well, Chop Robinson has 11.5 career sacks for Penn State. That ties T.J. Watt in his career high sacks at Wisconsin, but T.J. Watt really only played one season in Madison. So when we look back once again, 11 successful first-round picks at the edge rusher spot, and none of them had the numbers that Chop Robinson had in college. They all had better numbers, right? Higher single-season sack record or sack total, or higher career sacks. So first-round pick purely based on traits and not production. I'm not in love with this. I think Chop Robinson can be a very talented and special player in the NFL. Just watching the highlights and watching the film and watching the tape, he is extremely flexible. He's bendy. He's got great speed. He beats tackles. But you know which tackles he beats, Coop? He beats Rutgers' right tackle. That guy's not going to the NFL. I'm sorry if you're watching right now, but you probably know it too. So, yeah, I'm not entirely in love with the idea of drafting a guy just based on traits in round 1. I can get behind that in rounds 2, 3, or 4. But round 1, that's got to be a home run. You don't get first-round picks all the time. Like, you don't get a ton of first-round picks to waste one on traits. You know what I mean? Now, before we talk more about this and the quarterback position as well, today's show is being sponsored by Prize Picks. Thanks to Prize Picks, I've had a blast watching football this year, as I always do, but especially for some of those, well, let's just call it what it is, stinker primetime matchups. Because with Prize Picks, you can stay locked in on the games by picking more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. So take Thursday Night Football, all right? You can ride with me if you like. I'm taking the less on Geno Smith and his passing yards. I'm taking the more on CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard's yards. And I'm taking the more on Jason Myers at 1.5 field goals. I could see Geno having a lot of drives stall out before they draft J.J. McCarthy. So I'll take the more on Jason Myers. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a deposit match up to $100. All that information is in the comments and description of today's video. I went 4 for 4 on my Monday night selection, so if you want to ride with me for Thursday night, use that link and that promo code to get a deposit match up to $100. Now, going back to what Brugler said in his write-up, he's absolutely correct that Atlanta has to address the pass rusher position. When you look at Atlanta's pass rush over the last 5 years, they are ranking 28th this year, 31st last year, 32nd the year before that, 23rd, still bottom 10, and 29th in 2019. It has been a position that the Falcons as a franchise have never really gotten right. Outside of Abraham and Beasley for one season, they have never had a long-term answer at the edge rusher position. Now, I'm showing you guys the stats of Arnold Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter, D'Angelo Malone, and Zach Harrison. Does anyone want to take a guess as to why I'm showing you these 4 player stats and not, say, Bud Dupree, for example? These are the only 4 players currently under contract. for 2024. So outside of Ebiketie, who's having a really good sophomore season, I would say, at 4.5 sacks, there is not a whole lot of surefire willpower returning next year because Terry Fontenot could only address so many issues, it looked like, in the offseason. And edge rusher, despite being one of them, was a spot he went kind of skinny at by just signing veteran players like Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree to one-year deals and sort of kick the can down the road for long-term at the edge rusher spot. Now, of course, you might be asking, Petey, what about quarterbacks? Because Desmond Ridder surely does not look like a guy who is going to be here without a doubt long-term as this franchise QB. In my eyes, there are 5 players who I think are worthy of going first round, maybe even into the second round of this upcoming draft. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bo Nix, Jayden Daniels, and Michael Penix Jr. We could maybe add J.J. McCarthy on screen. I only have room for 5, and honestly, he is my 6th of those 5. So with that being said, we know Caleb Williams and Drake May are likely going to go top 5. And unless Atlanta makes a blockbuster trade, they will not be picking top 5. Which means I think they will be in range of Bo Nix, Jayden Daniels, and Michael Penix Jr. Who is my pick of those guys? I love Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels would be my selection if I had to pick between those 3 players. He is having an incredible season down in Baton Rouge, completing over 72% of his passes, 3,800 passing yards, 1,100 rushing yards, 50 total touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. And he's not just doing it against Grambling State or Georgia State. Look at his numbers in SEC games this year. He's got a better completion percentage, actually. The yards, 2,500 through 8 games. 25 touchdowns total, 25 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So Jayden Daniels is doing it against some of the best defenses in the country, and he has put on an absolute clinic this year. And I would love to see Jayden Daniels suit up for Atlanta next year. My prediction versus what I would do is I think Atlanta will make a trade for Justin Fields. If Caleb Williams goes to the Bears, which I believe he will end up being a Chicago Bear, Justin Fields is as good as gone in the Windy City. And to me, no team would be a better fit than Atlanta. Arthur Smith loves having a mobile quarterback. Of course, it would be a homecoming. And I think Atlanta would love to maybe use a second-round pick on Justin Fields and save that first-rounder on a defensive end, whether it's Chop Robinson, Jared Verse, or someone else. Now, I don't know if Justin Fields will require a first-round pick. That's going to be very dependent on how he plays the rest of the season. But let me know, should Atlanta take a quarterback in round 1? Yes or no? Chime in for me down below in the comments section. Really curious what you guys have to say. I know it's just November. There's a lot of football to be played. For hell, there's a 2023 season to be played out still. But it's always fun to talk mock drafts. It's always fun to peek ahead a little bit. That will do it for us on this edition of Falcons Today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone who takes time out of their day to come hang out with us. We're going to sign off, and we're going to see everyone later.